Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of the Spurs Chat Podcast. Of course, Tottenham Hotspur have got another game coming up, this time on Sunday at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium against Newcastle United. Spurs are currently 5th in the Premier League table. Newcastle are in 7th. 1 point separates the two sides. And of course, both teams are going and chasing for those top European places come the end of the season. To preview this game with me, I'm joined by Jonathan Greenwood from Newcastle Fans TV. Jonathan, lovely to have you here. How are you?
Yeah, thanks very much for the invite, Chris. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game on Sunday. I think obviously both teams only separated by a point, so not much in it in terms of the table. But yeah, I'm sure it'll be a very close encounter with the amount of injuries that both teams have got at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll certainly come on to that. Jonathan, let's start by talking about Newcastle's season so far. Of course, Newcastle was sat in 7th in the Premier League table at the moment, played 15, won 8, drawn 2, lost 5, got 26 points. The wins have come against Aston Villa, Brentford, Sheffield United, Burnley, Palace, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United. The defeats have come against Manchester City, Liverpool, Brighton, Bournemouth, and most recently on Sunday against Everton, losing 3-0. That was a shock result for most general fans of the Premier League. How would you describe your season so far?
I think on the whole, it's been a good start of the season. I know people will look and go, well, 7th in the league, you were in the majority of last season. Yeah, I think for me, it's been a good start of the season. It's been a strong start, especially the fact that we're still in every single competition, and we've got 12 or 13 injuries, or I think it was 12 injuries after Nick Pope's injury on last Saturday against Manchester United. Jamal Lascelles has got a bit of a slight knock, so could that be lucky or unlucky number 13? We'll see how that goes in terms of either a Tottenham or a Newcastle persuasion. But on the whole, very solid. We've still got a chance of going through the Champions League, and we're still in a good place. We're only a point off 5th. That could get you a Champions League place. So yeah, I'm not worried, but we could do with a few players coming back to the squad.
What's it like being back playing Champions League football, Jonathan? Because every single time I come to St James's Park, I always think like a huge club, massive club, fantastic fan base, and very similar to Spurs, that both teams are big clubs but haven't had much success in recent seasons and recent years.
Yeah, I think you could say, obviously, before Spurs had a good revival under Pochettino, that there were two sleeping giants, if you like, just at different stages of history. But for Newcastle, being in the Champions League has been absolutely incredible. No one could have predicted it a couple of years ago. It's just been absolutely magical, if you like. And I know there's obviously a lot of talking points about the ownership model, which I'm assuming you may ask about. But in terms of just watching Newcastle in the Champions League, that PSG game at St James's Park, the noise, particularly when Almiron scored the first and Shah scored the fourth. I don't think I've ever heard noise in a football stadium ever like that before. I've been very lucky to see us get a point at AC Milan, where we did very well to get a point that day. We were often against Dortmund, but Dortmund, were just a bit too good for us on the day. But I didn't do the Paris game, but we were about a minute away from getting a historic win in Paris, and the decision for the penalty was contentious, if we're being polite, on a Saturday morning. So yeah, it's been, on the whole, apart from the away game against Dortmund, we couldn't really have asked for much more from the players, and particularly the fact that when we did play Dortmund, we just had so many injuries. When you look at the bench, I think the bench that day, I think we only had Lewis Hall and Paul Dummett that were, in terms of outfield players, that could actually make a difference coming off the bench, and maybe Tino Livramento, I think, as well. So there was only 3 players that really could do something. And you normally see Champions League benches with normally about a dozen players. So yeah, it was a bit of a contrast, but on the whole, unbelievable experience. Hopefully we could beat AC Milan on Wednesday after hopefully getting a good result against your lot tomorrow.
Jonathan, what have you made of Tottenham so far this season? Because, of course, we were sat top of the Premier League table, unbeaten in the first 10. But in the last 5 games, of course, we've got a draw away at Manchester City, coming back in that game. But 4 defeats in our last 5. What have you made of Spurs? And, of course, Newcastle fans are probably most understandable about injuries, because you've got so many injuries yourself. But injuries have virtually killed us these past few matches.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, Chris. I don't really know what to make of Spurs, if I'm honest. As a big football fan, big Premier League fan, when Harry Kane leaves at the start of the season, I'm thinking, well, that's 30 goals in all competitions gone, minimum. And that's tough for any club, not just Tottenham. If we have the same with Newcastle, someone's putting 30 goals in the back of there. That's a great head start on every single club. I do watch a bit of Scottish football, so I've kept an eye on Ange Postecoglou. I do like his approach. I think his approach and his methods is going to keep a lot of fans on side, particularly Spurs fans as well, because even though Conte, Mourinho, managers like that who have come in, yes, probably bigger in name and stature, but the football they were producing wasn't the greatest, particularly Conte as well towards the end. It wasn't good. And you look at Pochettino, he will just go, look, I want to win every single game and I'll do it my way, whether I like it or not. I think the problem is the Premier League is just so ruthless. If you go gung-ho, and it is very much like a basketball game, sometimes it will work and you'll do well for the first 10. And then the last 5, when you play teams who just have that little bit of luck and, can take their chances and can almost, deal with what Spurs are offering, it's going to be very difficult. I think the Aston Villa game, was probably the most, probably the game where you can kind of learn the most from what Ange Postecoglou is trying to do, because you could have been 2 or 3 up at half time. But that goal just before half time gives Villa the confidence, and then the second half they take a chance and they kind of, nullify your attack going forward. They had almost like 6 defenders, if you like, and then the 4 just tucked in. So it was very, very difficult for Spurs to break through. In terms of what Spurs could do for this season, what would be deemed as a success, Champions League, you've got to say it's a possibility. Of course, it's a possibility, but I think the FA Cup could be something that Spurs should really concentrate on. You've got no European football. Like the League Cup against Fulham, and you've got to be on penalties, so that can happen. But focus on winning a cup and get that monkey off your back, if you like. And then with winning the FA Cup, that could help. That could, pardon the pun, spur you on for future success. But I think the bread and butter, I think what the top of the football club will be thinking is, can we get back into European competition? And I think that has to be the minimum for a club for the size of Spurs, is to be back in European competition. And they'll certainly be in contention for that.
Jonathan, what are you expecting from the game on Sunday? Because, of course, both teams have major injury problems. And let me just read some facts to you here. Newcastle have won 11 Premier League matches away to Tottenham, a total they have only matched against West Ham. The Magpies scored 8 goals versus Spurs last season, winning 2-1 away in October 2022 and 6-1 at home in April. Both sides have scored in each of their previous 7 league fixtures, which have produced an average of 4.43 goals per game. And the 56 Premier League matches between these sides have yielded 177 goals, an average of 3.16 per game, the highest figure of any fixture played at least 50 times in the division. There is certainly goals in this fixture, isn't there?
There's so many goals. I think that there's been so many great games over the years. I think, obviously, everyone will remember the 6-1 last season at St James's Park. I'm sure you remember it well, Chris.
We don't want to remember it. The fans walked out the stadium after 20 minutes.
I think there was a few people at King's Cross after 20-25 minutes. I couldn't believe what they were saying. But no, in all seriousness, in that respect, though, I think that's probably the best thing that ever happened to Spurs. And I'll tell you why. Because if that wasn't a wake-up call for the whole club to have a complete reset for Tottenham, it needed a performance like that. 2 teams that were battling out for the Champions League at the time, 1 team going somewhere, the other team is kind of stuck in a little bit of limbo. I think Spurs fans will probably not admit it now, but I think they'll look back as soon as Postecoglou maybe has a full season under his belt and look at where they were this time last year. They can go, well, actually, that might have been the best thing that ever happened to us. But going back onto the actual, in terms of goals, and there's been so many goals. I've been at Tottenham a few times over the years, and I've never seen a 0-0. I can't remember the last time there has been a 0-0. But but the thing is, even going to this game tomorrow, you just know with an Ange Postecoglou side and an Eddie Howe side, it is not going to end 0-0 because they both want to win. They're both going to go out and attack, regardless of the injuries that both teams have. They are. I'll be absolutely amazed. I'd love to know the odds for a 0-0. I'd love to know the odds because I just can't see it happening at all.
Jonathan, what have you made of the appointment of Ange Postecoglou? Because of course, we've gone through many managers in recent seasons. Of course, Pochettino took us to a Champions League final in 2019. Of course, the club made that change to appoint Jose Mourinho. Then, of course, Nuno Espirito Santo, Antonio Conte, Stellini took over for a little bit during that game last season in April at Newcastle, and Ryan Mason's helped us out a couple of times as well. From an outsider looking in at Spurs, are you surprised that Spurs haven't won a trophy in 15 years and have pushed on in that next level?
Yeah, I am a little bit surprised. I think when you look at the players that you've had, the managers that you've had, I'm absolutely surprised that you haven't managed to get over the line. You know, Champions League final, FA Cup semi-finals, League Cup final, you know, second in the Premier League. You can't have got much closer. You know, you can't have got much closer. And you can look back all these times thinking, oh, brilliant, brilliant memories. But it's a bit like Newcastle. Unless you've got that trophy, you can't really say, oh, it was a genuine success. There was good performances, of course they have. You know, especially under Pochettino, you know, you were beating teams left, right, and centre, and it wasn't a surprise that you were beating teams like Manchester United, Chelsea, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal. You know, it wasn't a surprise. It was expected. Now it's at the minute with Postecoglou, he's kind of having to prove himself again, and this is where he kind of thinks. I think Spurs are kind of going 2 steps back to go forward, if you like, and trying to just reset everything within the football club. But I do think with time he can do well. I think he'll need a couple more transfer windows. I think, like I say, the fact that he didn't have Kane at the start of pretty much the day before the Premier League started, and you're top after 10 games just shows how good he was with the players that he has. But I think there's 2 players really that have really impressed me for Spurs, who are both obviously injured and brilliant from a Newcastle point of view, is obviously Mickey van der Ven and James Maddison, because they just make your team so much stronger. I think Van der Ven is such an underrated centre half at times. Maddison just ticks. He just keeps everything ticking and nose between Tottenham and Newcastle for a long time to see where James Maddison would end up. But he's just flourished at Tottenham. He really, really has, and it's a big loss for Tottenham. A big, big loss, because I think he's not back till the new year. So it'll be interesting to see how Spurs cope without them. But I think Postecoglou, when he was at Celtic, had a pressure to win the league, and that is the only pressure that you have. You finish above Rangers, you win the league. If Rangers finish above Celtic, you win the league. That is their pressure. And it's a different sort of pressure at Tottenham, in the sense that maybe you're not expected to win every week, but what you are expected to do is to get into the topper ends of the Premier League table, and that is a must. That is a must for the size of Spurs. And at the minute, you've got to say after 15 games, you know, 5th in the league, a couple of points off the Champions League, some good results. Yes, a couple of disappointing ones, but there's something to work with.
As you mentioned earlier about the FA Cup, you know, Spurs last won the FA Cup in 1991, which is an amazing stat. And everyone I talk to, everyone wants to, you know, the club to take the FA Cup seriously. And I hope that Ange Postecoglou does, and we do go far in that competition. Talking about, you mentioned your owners earlier on. Are you surprised that you haven't spent more money and really gone for it in transfer windows? Because I think most teams, you know, most fans, including myself, thought that Newcastle would spend a lot more in the previous transfer windows. Do you expect them to spend big in January and next summer and really push on to, you know, at what point do Newcastle start competing for the Premier League with the money that you've got?
I don't. In terms of the latter part of your question, Chris, I don't think we're a million miles away. I think it may be maybe 2 years away. I think in terms of going back to the first part of the question with the spending itself, it was different types of spending in terms of what we needed at the particular times. When we first got taken over, it was to spend to get the players in that will keep the Premier League, keep us up in the Premier League, and then we'll do spending around it to make us stronger. I think what Newcastle were very clever at, they built a spine of the team within the first 2 transfer windows. They got the number 1 choice goalkeeper in Nick Pope. They got the number 1 choice centre half in Sven Botman. They've got the number 1 choice centre midfielder in Bruno Guimaraes, and they've got the number 1 centre forward that they wanted in Alexander Isak. Now, all 4 of those players have been a success for Newcastle, and that is from people in high positions looking what we needed at the time and going, right, what can we spend and what should we spend as well? Because there was some ridiculous prices for a lot of players, especially in the first couple of transfer windows. But I think now that's calmed down a little bit, and there's no that Newcastle tax. I think the club will spend a little bit more in certain areas, but I think the biggest reminder more than anything, if you do something wrong, is Everton and getting a minus 10 point deduction. And I think Newcastle, even in the summer, were quite reluctant to go, massively overboard, because even though yes, they had Champions League money, that Champions League money is not really going to get spent until the following season anyway. So it was kind of almost planning for what you're going to do. In the summer, Newcastle were saying we're only going to spend around about 80 to 100 million at the very, very most. And they did. They spent maybe about the 100 million mark. They spent 55 million on Sandro Tonali, spent money on Harvey Barnes, and they bought in Tino Livramento, who's been absolutely outstanding so far, a loan signing with Lewis Hall. And that's pretty much been about it for Newcastle. There hasn't been much more activity. But I think what you will see from maybe next summer is a few players leaving the club that are out of contract and then bringing in some more players when we can actually spend a little bit more money. But I've been so impressed with how Newcastle have dealt with the transfer window. I would say 90% of the players they've bought in have been a success, and that's because you've got the right people doing the right jobs in a football club. You know, you look at Manchester United, for example; they're a bit of a mess. Don't know what's happening in terms of players going in, and when they bring a player in, they don't seem to hit it off. When Newcastle's been completely the opposite, and it's been fantastic to see.
Would you say then, Jonathan, that every fan is on board with the new owners and that connection is back amongst the fans with the owners, the manager and the players?
I would say it's around about that 98% mark. I think there will be a few fans, and there is, and I know a couple of fans that will never be on board with the owners that we have for obvious reasons, and obviously the allegations that they face. All I can really say is that I support the football club. I didn't support Mike Ashley in Sports Direct. I don't support this ownership, but I support Newcastle, and the Newcastle doing well on the football pitch is the most important thing. As long as they're doing well on the pitch and they're performing well enough off the pitch in terms to be no financial worries, I'm fine with that personally. But yeah, the spirit in the football club it's just come back, and 2 years ago, or just over 2 years ago, it was just really, really difficult to kind of get on board. It was Steve Bruce as manager. Nothing against Steve Bruce, but he just wasn't the manager that we needed. He picked up some good results along the way, but for the vast majority of it, it wasn't great to watch. The players that we had, we just couldn't seem to get the best out of them at the time. And the Mike Ashley era was like a dark cloud, particularly over the last maybe 5 or 6 years of that ownership. Rafa Benitez tried to do something, wasn't allowed to, left. And I think the famous quote from Steve Bruce says, "I'll just make sure that the club's ticking along." That's not what a football club's about. If you want a business, a business can tick along. That's absolutely fine. A football club, you need to have a bit of hope, a bit of ambition. And you could say that with Spurs, without Postecoglou coming in, he's giving you that hope to think, well, actually, can we win the FA Cup this year? Can we get into the Champions League? Can we do well? And that's what we were missing out on. But yeah, the fan, like I say, you go to Newcastle now, Chris, and it's just a party all the time. Like, people will take days off work. We'll take days off work on Wednesday for this AC Milan match. They'll be at the pubs at 12, 1 o'clock, just soaked in the atmosphere, having a few drinks, and then win, lose or draw. We're not really win, lose or draw. It doesn't really matter really, because we weren't expected to go much further than the group stage when the group came out. So. Yeah, it's just amazing. The city's just absolutely bouncing at the minute. You can't buy a ticket for love of the money. We need a bigger ground, but when the people that are in the ground, and I'm one of them, I'm very fortunate because it's the hottest ticket in Toon, if you like.
That's nice to hear, because, of course, the atmosphere at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has changed as well. I know, obviously, it's been hard these last few weeks losing these games, but everyone can see what Ange Postecoglou is doing, and the style of football is completely different to what we've seen in recent seasons. Talking about the team who's ahead of this game, Ange Postecoglou said in his presser yesterday about Heung-min Son. We'll see how Son he is. He will have a late fitness test. He was a bit sore after the game against West Ham. Spurs, of course, are still without Bentancur, Perisic, Maddison, Van der Ven, Sessegnon, Solomon, Whiteman and Eric Dyer. And Newcastle boss Eddie Howe is optimistic that Lascelles will be fit despite limping off in the closing stages of the defeat against Everton. And Newcastle are likely to be without a dozen players, including goalkeeper Nick Pope, who could be sidelined until April. Jonathan, just briefly tell me about all of the players that you've got out injured, and are they key players that are out injured that would get into your starting 11? Yeah,
100%. Sven Botman being one. I think he's obviously Fabian Schär's probably been our best centre half this season because he's played the most games, and arguably could have been probably our best centre half last season. But Sven Botman is just a level above Jamal Lascelles, Emile Kraft, and Paul Dummett at this moment in time. Midfield, we're missing Sandro Tonali for obvious reasons with the betting controversy, but we're missing Joe Willock, the former Arsenal man. Sean Longstaff has been absolutely outstanding since Eddie Howe's walked through the door. Callum Wilson, who, loads of goals, done really well for Newcastle. Harvey Barnes, haven't really seen much of, but a proven Premier League player. The list goes on, Chris. I could probably cry you a river with all the players that you have injured. But I would say, not necessarily to start, but more, we just need more options off the bench. Like Eddie Howe's played the same starting 11 for the vast majority of games. I think more than 80 minutes for the last 4 games, and we've played Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester United, Chelsea, and Everton. Like, that's a difficult running at the best of times. And, the Everton result was disappointing, but was it really surprising with the amount of injuries that we've had? And with teams like Everton only playing 1 game a week, you're not surprised when these results happen obviously from a Newcastle point of view, from maybe the wider fan bases of other clubs, but might be a little bit different. But yeah, we need players back just to kind of get the bench a little bit stronger as well. But Nick Pope being out a bit of a blow. We've got Dubravka, who will come in, who I think just needs a couple of games to kind of settle down. But in terms of getting used to how Newcastle plays, only played 2 games in 18 months. But yeah, we need players back as soon as possible.
Jonathan, who should the Spurs players who should the Spurs fans look out for on Sunday in the Newcastle team? Who are going to be your key players ahead of this game?
I have to be honest, I would say Bruno Guimaraes sticks out like a sore thumb, if I'm honest. When we don't have him in the team, we don't win games. When we do have him in the team, we win games more than we lose. And it's just his record really is absolutely outstanding when he plays for Newcastle. I think he's only lost 1 home game or in the Premier League since he arrived at Newcastle, or 2 home games in the Premier League. He's been here nearly nearly 2 years. So that just shows how good of a player he's been, really. If you stop Bruno Guimaraes at Newcastle, it's certainly, I wouldn't say you guarantee to win the game, but you make Newcastle, it's tough for Newcastle to kind of keep going. Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, and the young lad Lewis Miley, who's just coming out of nowhere, really. That's been our settled midfielder for the last few games, and it's worked really, really well, apart from maybe the last 20 minutes against Everton where we kind of capitulated. He keeps everything ticking. Alexander Isak's very quiet, but he scores goals. He links up well, but generally speaking, he doesn't have the busiest games, but he'll score a goal. A bit like, over the years with Shearer, maybe Sheringham from a Tottenham perspective, didn't do a lot, but you'd see his name in the paper the following day. And it's just a case that's what Isak's trying to do at the minute. But yeah, they're probably the 2 outstanding players in this team. Anthony Gordon's been electric as well. But again, it's just how, are they fatigued? Are they not? It just depends. I think the only good thing is because Tottenham are in a similar situation, it might actually benefit Newcastle in that way. But who knows? Who absolutely knows? I think the Son's missing for Spurs. That's a big miss, because he is obviously at the minute, because there's no Maddison. I think he's the outstanding player. He is your outstanding player, I should say. He was brilliant against Manchester City. I thought he was outstanding. It was a great game to watch as well last week. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens.
John, apart from Heung-min Son, who you mentioned there, and the players that are going to be fit and could possibly play in the game, who do you fear as a Newcastle fan? What Spurs players do you fear?
To be honest, the players I fear are the ones that are missing. The likes of your Bentancurs, if you Mickey van der Vens, potentially Heung-min Son. For me, when I look at Spurs, Kulusevski's always been a player. I think you can see that there's a player in there. I think he just needs to be a little bit more consistent, which I think Postecoglou potentially could do that. Bissouma, I like Bissouma, but I think he probably should be giving you more for the amount of money you paid for him, if I'm honest. Romero he's got a lot of aggression, but if you could just tame it down just ever so slightly, he'll be absolutely fine. But you just need to tame it down ever so slightly. Maybe that's just the South American in him, if you like. But I do look at that defence, and I think you're going to get chances just because you're missing obviously the players that you have. Like I think you played Emerson Royale centre half, and and I'm looking at that, I'm thinking, well, if I'm Alexander Isak, I'm licking my lips, because he's not a natural centre half. If you can get him on the wrong side, there's something that you can gain from there. But if I had to pick out of the players that we know are definitely fit, probably Kulusevski. He'd be the one that I think he's probably the outstanding talent out of the team so far. But it'd be interesting to see what happens.
Jonathan, in this game, it'll be refereed by Chris Kavanagh. The 4th official will be Tom Bramall, and VAR will be Peter Banks. What's VAR been like for Newcastle United this season? Are you a fan of VAR?
I'm a fan of it. I'm just not a fan of the people that operate it, if I'm honest. I just feel like they're so arrogant towards the public about VAR in general. I really do. They feel like it's their own baby, and they're the only ones that can play with their own like PlayStation, if you like. And the technology is there to improve the game. But I think it might be Postecoglou. It's like it's re-refereeing the game. You don't re-referee a game of football. You know, if it was a blatant and obvious error, like let's just say, for example, like on Sunday, Kulusevski is 2 yards offside and Spurs score. That's a blatant error. And if they've missed it, then that's why VAR's there. But if a ball gets played in, a corner gets played in, and 4 or 5 people are trying to head the ball, and it heads off someone, it flicks their arm, like ever so slightly, and nobody notices it, no one's claiming it, that's not an obvious error. And you've seen so many times this season, not just Newcastle, not just Tottenham, every club's had the wrong end of it this season. We've had probably the biggest one was in the Champions League, and normally in the Champions League, it's actually done pretty well. You know, they've got the semi-automated offsides, which have been, I don't understand why it's not there in the Premier League. It just seems to be clear as mud more than anything, where the VAR, when they use the offside, it just seems to be so, I just don't think it looks definitive, if I'm honest. But for me, it just needs to be operated better. You just need people that actually train how to do it. Let the referees referee the game and actually bring in VAR officials that actually can be trained to do VAR. Because if you've got a referee refereeing a game on Saturday and then being a VAR on Sunday, like mentally you're going to be tired. Mentally, that's just normal. That's just natural. And I don't think it's fair on the clubs, because you just look at the latest Premier League TV deal, £6.7 billion. It's $1 billion industry, and this is just in the UK alone. It needs to be treated like a big boy's business, and at the minute, it's a Mickey Mouse.
Jonathan, lastly, a couple of predictions. Who would you predict to finish in the top 4?
My top 4 is Manchester City still win the league for me. I think Arsenal will probably bottle it.
I agree.
I think, I'm sure you probably will. The only thing I will say, a caveat that though, buying Declan Rice is going to get them closer, but I still don't think they'll win it.
I agree.
Manchester City first. I think Arsenal have just about finished second over Liverpool. I think it'll be very close. I don't think there'll be much in it at all. I just think the Europa League might be a bit of a killer for Liverpool. So I'll go Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool. And I said Newcastle in August, and I'll say Newcastle again, because I think we'll have the players back. We might have less competitions to be in January, and if we can get on a bit of a run and have a bit more players to use and utilise, I think we can get in the top 4. But Aston Villa have been absolutely outstanding. Man United's average, but are up there. Tottenham are starting well. I think it'll be one of us 4, but we need Villa to get an injury for Watkins or Diaby or something like that, and that'll give us a bit of a chance. But I'll say Newcastle just with a little bit of bias.
Where do you think Spurs will finish?
6th. I don't think there'll be a lot of points in it. I just think with Spurs, it's an interesting, because they could finish 4th. They could, because they've got, like I say, you're playing one game a week. I just think 6th. I just think it's just maybe too much to learn, too much too quick, maybe for Postecoglou and working out the Premier League. But do you know what? It wouldn't surprise me if you finished 4th. But if I'm putting my neck on the line, I'll probably go Newcastle 4th, Villa 5th, Spurs 6th, Man United 7th, because I just don't rate Man United at all. They were absolutely bang average at best against us last week. I just don't know how they could pick up results, because they literally they came to St James's Park last week, and I've never felt so confident going into a game, and they were absolutely rubbish. So I'll say Spurs to finish 6th, but I'm not putting any money on it.
We all knew as Spurs fans, Jonathan, sitting top of the league, unbeaten after 10 games, we all knew 1 or 2 injuries would then derail us, and of course it has. And that Chelsea game has been a disaster.
But you wouldn't have got a Man City, Chris, and drew 3-3 last season.
Absolutely not.
And that shows where the club's gone. That shows where the club's gone. You know, you never thought Spurs were out of that game on Sunday, where if that was a Conte or a Mourinho, they played 10 behind the ball, and if it was 1-0, you kind of knew it was game over there and then. Even at 2-1 or at 3-2, you knew Spurs had a chance, and that just shows the improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonathan, final question for you. I expect Spurs to make one change. Sarr to come in for Højbjerg, and hopefully Heung-min Son is fit and available for this game. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Spurs win. Hopeful. Jonathan, what's your predicted lineup and your score prediction?
From what we're hearing, there's not going to be many changes. We might have a couple of players back on the bench, but I think it'll be the same 11. So Dubravka, Trippier, former Tottenham player, done exceptionally well, apart from Thursday, I may add. Cher, Lascelles and Livramento, Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Linton, Lewis Miley, Miguel Almiron, Isak and Gordon. Maybe Callum Wilson on the bench, maybe Joe Willock maybe on the bench, and maybe Sean Longstaff maybe on the bench, but late fitness tests as well. In terms of a prediction, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to go 2-1 away win. I think there'll definitely be goals. I think if Newcastle can score first, I think that makes things a little bit easier. I just think Newcastle are just better defensively, and I just think that's why we'll just about edge it. But I'd probably take a point right now, just because of the injuries, and I don't know what the team's going to be. But if the team's a little bit stronger on the bench, then maybe my mind will change. But at this moment in time, as we're recording, Newcastle to nick it 2-1. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I think knowing Arlo, probably you'll get an injury and we'll get a bad injury as well. So,
oh yeah, no more injuries, please.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, 2-1 away win. Why not?
Well, hopefully it'll be a truly entertaining game like there have been in recent seasons, Spurs Newcastle. Jonathan, finally, tell everyone about Newcastle Fans TV, what sort of content you're putting out at the moment, what sort of content you will be putting out in the future, and how did you get involved with Newcastle Fans TV?
Yeah, so Newcastle Fans TV, we've got a YouTube channel, we've got Facebook page, Instagram, Twitter. There's probably more. Lee will probably tell me off, but I can't think off the top of my head. But I don't know, because there's been so many games. Because we're just speaking off camera, there's a game every 3 days. We're just basically filming match content. We're literally by the time we're finishing, it's the next day, it's another day, and then we've got the game. So literally, if you want all the best Newcastle United match content, it's Newcastle Fans TV. It's NFTV on Twitter, and then the Twitter handle's just underneath as well. So yeah, that's probably the best place to find us. Lee's at the game tomorrow. He's making a trip down from Newcastle to London tomorrow morning. So yeah, hopefully it's a good trip for him. But yeah, it's just basically a minute until Boxing Day. We're just at every game, just getting on with it, and then hopefully we'll get a bit of a break after the new year. We'll have a few more videos out, a few more interviews out as well.
Jonathan, you've been a great guest. Thank you so much for joining me. And apart from tomorrow afternoon, good luck for the rest of the season, and hopefully we'll have you back on again very soon when, of course, the reverse fixture comes around. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and we will see you after the game on Sunday. Come on, you Spurs.